Ji is a fourth-year university student about to graduate. While other students are busy looking for jobs, he is immersed in developing his special ability. This is a superpower that Ji has had since birth. Even though he could only pierce 7 thin layers of paper, he felt extremely satisfied. His grandfather had practiced hard all his life to be able to pierce a knife several centimeters thick. One day, Ji received a letter. A professor named Masami wanted to meet him. Ji was extremely curious. He had never met the professor before, but he still went to the address written on the letter. At the professor's office, he discovered that the professor was not there. An assistant lecturer named Ivy said the professor had gone out. Ji was disappointed and was about to leave when suddenly a student there ran after him. Having seen Ji's superpowers on video, the student invited Ji to perform live. Ji did not refuse. He drew a cross on a glass, and after a moment, a cross-shaped hole appeared. The professor's students widened their eyes in amazement. Ivy was even more surprised because Professor Masami had the same superpower. She took out a glass cup from her pocket with a bigger hole in it. This was the cup the professor had brought to school. The professor had lost contact after going out, so Ivy had come to the school to look for clues. The professor seemed like he was possessed. At home, he constantly practiced his superpower, punching holes in items around the house. His wife suspected this was related to the project he had been researching recently, so she wanted the school to take responsibility for finding her husband. During a lecture, Ivy realized that it was possible the professor had encountered something because he was an expert in cultural history research. This research coincidentally related to his hometown, the town of Marukawa, which is said to be hundreds of thousands of years old. Last year, the Mandarin of Marukawa town betrayed the lord of this place. The lord angrily sent 3,000 soldiers to punish him. The geographical position of Marukawa town, atop Mount Mikami, was extremely advantageous. Surrounded by 7 other mountains, it was easy to defend against attacks. However, the people of Marukawa town were not afraid of the approaching enemy. Under the guidance of a priest, more than 30 people were able to defeat over 3,000 invaders. Those who knew about this part of history felt it was an exaggeration, but Professor Masami believed it to be true. Not long ago, he even returned to his hometown to investigate. This resulted in his disappearance in just one night. Imi immediately thought of Ji's superpower. She guessed that Ji was similar to Professor Masami, both being descendants of the people from Marukawa town hundreds of years ago. This was also the reason why the professor had written to Ji. She could not have imagined that he had such a background until Imi showed him the professor's photo. She suddenly felt a familiar feeling in his heart, like a connection to his bloodline. Imi's eyes lit up. She wanted to go to Marukawa town to find Professor Masami. Ji hesitated, not knowing what to do. After returning home, Ji called his family to ask about their history. Only then did he learn that his family branch had moved out of Marukawa town 120 years ago, so he didn't know the related history. Meanwhile, in Marukawa town, at a construction company building, a supervisor was in the office arranging documents when suddenly an explosion was heard behind him. He curiously raised his head to see what was going on. He saw a large circular hole punched in the window. The supervisor instinctively reached out to touch it. As a result, another explosion rang out. Half of his arm suddenly disappeared. Just like that, the supervisor was suddenly killed in the company office. Such a strange murder event immediately attracted the media's attention. Except for the circle on the window at the scene, there were no suspicious points. Imi, who was watching the incident, immediately remembered Professor Masami. This was not entirely consistent with his hole-punching ability. Ji immediately decided to go with Imi's group to Marukawa town. One afternoon, the next day, or before people went by car. The town seemed completely isolated from the world. The group consisted of Ji, Imi, and 2 of Professor Masami's students. As soon as they arrived at the train station, they saw Mount Mikami with its beautiful peak. It is said to have an extremely important and irreplaceable position in the hearts of the local people. Ji's group divided into 2 small groups and began to search everywhere for Professor Masami's whereabouts. Surprisingly, everyone they asked agreed that they had never seen this person. After a busy afternoon, they walked into a cafe and saw an advertisement on the wall saying that the Tanabata ceremony would be held in 3 days. Ji was surprised when the coffee shop employee Sachiko brought coffee to him, and he suddenly felt his heart pounding, similar to when he first saw Professor Masami's photo. It felt like they had the same bloodline. The student Mamoru next to him saw this and teased that it was clearly the feeling of having just met and fallen in love. At this moment, they heard guests at a nearby table discussing someone they called the lecturer. Mamoru was startled and hurriedly went over to ask about the lecturer. Everyone immediately became alert and said they had never met anyone like that. They explained that lecturer was a way of addressing a character in the ceremony. While 2 people chatted in silence, she mentioned his last name was Minami. As a result, the attitude of the other two guests changed 180 degrees. Just like that, G was suddenly treated with great respect by everyone. When he returned to the hotel, he still felt as if he was on cloud nine. What's even more unbelievable is that the town chief of Marukawa suddenly came to greet him personally. He wanted to invite everyone to join a party that night. The enthusiasm of the villagers made G both happy and scared inside. The conversations at the party finally confirmed Ibi's guess. G's family is a branch of the Masami family, and their status in the village is extremely high. The townspeople called G Young Master. He was carefully asked if he had superpowers, and G nodded. As he was preparing to demonstrate for everyone, a group of police suddenly arrived. They came to investigate yesterday's murder case. The architectural company's plan to renovate the Murakawa Mountain Stadium was immediately protested by all the people, and the group who protested the most would, of course, be the target of the police investigation. However, the mayor used the excuse of not having accurate evidence to force the police group to leave. Everyone tried to smile and went back to drinking, but the atmosphere was no longer as happy as before. After G's group went up to Murakawa Mountain, they guessed that Professor Masami might have come here, but after climbing to the top of the mountain, they still couldn't find any clues. They only saw a unique monkey-shaped statue standing in the middle of every mountain top. After returning to the hotel, she met an unexpected guest who turned out to be Sachiko, the employee at the cafe he met yesterday. As soon as she met him, she asked if he was within reach. Seeing G bewildered and not understanding, Sachiko changed her approach, asking if he knew how to use a motorbike. G immediately understood and eagerly showed off his abilities to Sachiko. Seeing the water can with a hole pierced, her expression changed. Sachiko felt much more at ease. She secretly told G to be careful of the people in town. After she finished speaking, she hurriedly left the hotel. The two of them did not know that the hotel owner had secretly picked up the phone and told her husband that G was someone within reach. Today coincided with the day of Marukawa Town's Tanabata ceremony. Ibi's group happily strolled in the street, eating snacks. Seeing Sachiko in the crowd, G had many questions in his heart, so he initiated a conversation with her. It seemed like Sachiko also had sympathy for G, so she didn't hide the town's secret. In the ancient families, there were some people who possessed superpowers to create holes, and they were called people within reach, including G. The whole town had a total of 6 people with superpowers, including someone who could open new windows and was qualified to become the Mandarin of Marukawa Town. At this time, she still did not realize how formidable these superpowers were, nor did he ask what opening the window meant. While the two were talking, a married man accidentally encountered a group of thugs on the street. The leader spoke provocatively and took off his hat. Unexpectedly, there was a round pearl in the middle of his head. The thugs saw this and were extremely scared. As they were preparing to leave, they were attacked by their opponent's superpower. Imi's group heard some noise. When they turned around, they suddenly saw a light on the mountain. The teacher immediately understood that it was not the festival activity. She then led Mamoru up the mountain. When they were about to reach the top, they saw a group of people dressed in white waving fire torches rhythmically as if they were praying to a certain god. The people in white had just left when the two of them hurriedly ran towards the top of the mountain and discovered that one of the previous 7 stones was missing. While they were wondering, the people wearing white clothes suddenly turned around and saw the strangers. They didn't hesitate to attack until they heard Imi's scream. The man leading the group smiled and revealed himself to be the town chief of Marukawa. He said he thought someone was sabotaging the ritual ceremony, so they suddenly took action. After confirming that the two hadn't seen anything important, the town chief ordered them to leave. Even though Mamoru's injuries were not too serious, they inevitably felt a bit of fear, not to mention the extremely strange ceremony they had witnessed. When they asked about Professor Masami's whereabouts, the town chief's eyes clearly showed avoidance as if they were intentionally hiding something. Amy decided to stop pursuing the matter. Early the next morning, she bought bus tickets for G's group so they could return to school first, while she wanted to stay alone to investigate further. Meanwhile, the man with superpowers arrived at the hotel. He went up to the 2nd floor and saw that G's group had left. First, he used his superpowers to prevent the landlady from calling anyone. Then he used the customer information registered at the hotel to find out about G. G had just returned to school, and he was suddenly approached by Sachiko's older brother named Takashi. Hearing this, G immediately became cautious. Takashi requested G to demonstrate his superpowers. Seeing the hole the size of a thumb, Takashi showed a look of disdain. He told G to use superpowers without having to shout loudly. Then he immediately showed G how to use superpowers properly. Takashi raised his hand slightly, then focused his attention on a black ball that was getting bigger and bigger. G was so surprised that he opened his mouth wide, not expecting that his powers could be used like that. He was about to raise his hand to touch the ball, but was immediately stopped by Takashi. This ball will destroy everything that comes into contact with it. The ball Takashi created was so small because it had just formed. It hit the paper and lost its energy. G half believed and half doubted under Takashi's guidance. He began to concentrate mentally, and a black ball appeared but very quickly dissipated. Takashi explained that they were called people within range, meaning that just by putting your hand out, you can get something that doesn't belong here. She kept muttering to understand the meaning. After he tried again, he was clearly much better than before. Seeing the ball growing bigger, Takashi also felt surprised. He quickly ran out to find a bucket of water that could interrupt G's process of using magic. G was so happy that he didn't notice Takashi's slightly strange smile. As soon as he got home, G was eager to share this good news with Sachiko. He didn't expect Sachiko to tell him not to be too close to Takashi. That night, Takashi called G and said he had something to do and asked for his help. At the same time, in a coffee shop in Marukawa town, there were two people from out of town. The owner immediately reported this news to the town chief. The group of leading people in the town gathered together and discussed the matter, being careful not to say too much for fear of accidentally revealing something. It seemed like they were really hiding something. At this moment, Imi suddenly received a call from an unknown number. It turned out to be Professor Masami, who had been missing for a long time. He mumbled that the window had opened and it was very possible that he would never be able to return again. He'd warned that something big was about to happen in this place. In a hall of the National Diet Building in Tokyo, a member of the National Assembly was standing on a podium giving a speech. Unexpectedly, in the hallway, just a wall away, a man wearing a hat raised his hand close to the wall. Without warning, a black ball suddenly appeared in the lobby. A curious assembly member reached out and touched it. As a result, the upper half of his body suddenly disappeared. A member of the National Assembly was assassinated by a mysterious black ball in front of many people. Although this story was spread widely under someone's deliberate guidance, the town of Marukawa, which was the birthplace of that mysterious energy source, was immediately attributed as the greatest threat. The town chief even invited the true leader of the town to be the Mandarin. For generations, ancestors had considered the black ball superpower to be a weapon that kills humanity. People were not allowed to use this energy source outside of town. But in this generation, two people with superpowers had appeared who did not comply with the rule. One person, Takashi, was considered a stain on the whole town. The only remaining person was G, who terrified the villagers. Only G could conveniently create such a big black ball that could instantly kill a member of the National Assembly, but the officials could not understand how G, who had just discovered his powers, could already know about the town's rules. What was his purpose in doing so? Now, G suddenly received an offer from Takashi for help. Thinking about his missing teacher, he really couldn't find a reason to refuse. After arriving at the meeting place, G was surprised to find out that Takashi wanted him to be a guest performer for a seminar to develop new skills. Solemnly introduced by the host, G, wearing a suit, walked up to the podium. His hands suddenly raised a black ball. The audience below the stage opened their eyes wide, one after another, followed by a miraculous moment when the black shadow touched an object, instantly causing it to split in two. Seeing such a strange scene, the applause immediately rang out like thunder. G really liked the feeling of being praised by everyone like this. He exclaimed that he finally had a place to use his abilities. What made G even happier was that the host suddenly took out a pile of money, saying this was G's performance fee, and invited him to participate in performances over the next few days. In reality, this was Takashi's true purpose. Through G's performances, he aimed to attract a large number of high-ranking members to join. He and a host would collect admission fees in the name of showcasing people's abilities. At most, G received a very small salary. Without knowing anything, G was suddenly turned into a hired employee of the highest rank. While happy, G suddenly discovered that a red dot appeared on his forehead. He thought it was just acne, but G did not expect that this was the price to pay for using superpowers, like the people with long-standing abilities in Marukawa town. The red dot on their head seemed to want to fall off. After a few days of non-stop performances, G became known to many people. While he was happily receiving flattery from fans, his juniors suddenly pulled G to the library. She was a little hesitant to take out her phone and play a recording. She had accidentally eavesdropped on a conversation between Takashi and the host and recorded the entire content. At this moment, G realized that he had become Takashi's tool to make money, especially when he heard the other person making fun of him for being stupid and naive. G immediately ran to confront Takashi, angry but still politely scolding the other person. He was completely in love with his superpower and didn't want to use it like this. Takashi was so angry that his veins flared, and he scolded G for being useless. She didn't make any excuses and bowed his head deeply as if he had paid off Takashi's kindness for guiding him. Meanwhile, Zuki, who had long had superpowers, was guided to a luxurious villa by a man dressed in black. The owner of the villa was the one who had hired him to kill a member of the National Assembly. He was extremely curious about Zuki's ability to create black balls. The person who hired Zuki had great influence in the political and business world. For some unexplainable reason, he went everywhere looking for people within reach. He asked Zuki to take off his mask and seriously talk to him. Seeing that Zuki didn't move at all, he angrily clapped his hands and the bodyguards held up guns. Before they could step in, Zuki raised his hands and the black ball flew straight into the heads of those people. Immediately after that, the whole group fell to the ground one by one. The villa owner was so scared that he quickly retreated, and then he immediately saw Zuki take off his mask to reveal an extremely scary face. Fortunately, he was an experienced person, so it didn't take long for him to regain his composure. He thought that collaborating with someone like Zuki would be interesting. Zuki happily admitted that he had killed the person in charge of the former construction company because the other party had touched the interests of Murukawa Town. It could be seen that even though Zuki had left Murukawa Town, in his heart, he was always longing for his homeland. Meanwhile, he had lost his source of income. At this time, he was immersed in the pain of losing his job. Suddenly, the people in the square heard screams. It turned out that there was a little boy left in a car by his mother. The people around were discussing how to break the glass door to save him. She pushed everyone out. He immediately used his power to open a round hole in the window. Finally, he was able to open the car door and save the child. The boy's mother kept bowing her head to thank him. She felt a satisfaction he had never felt before. He finally found the true use of his superpower. The rescue process was coincidentally recorded by a passerby and posted online, creating a huge wave of public opinion. Everyone was discussing who this good person with superpowers was. Takashi, who already hated G, couldn't stand to see G satisfied, so he suddenly thought of a plot. Early the next day, circular holes of different sizes appeared on the signs of many state administrative agencies. Many people guessed if it was possible that the hero with superpowers had done it. Only the people in Murukawa Town knew who did this. Except for Takashi, who had been banished from the town. Who else would do this? The town minister was determined to eliminate this threat. Displaying superpowers outside the town would likely corner the town into an inescapable abyss. He suddenly shouted that they needed Professor Masami to solve this hidden danger. Takashi did not expect that Professor Masami, whom G and his group had been searching for so hard, was still hiding in Murukawa Town. At this time, Professor Masami still had an important mission to do, so he did not want to leave the town. He suggested sending out Sachiko. She has full authority to resolve this matter. In Tokyo, since the story of using superpowers to save people, Ji's ability to research his powers on his own has improved dramatically. Ji's friends discovered that the Black Shadow can cause everything to disappear, so they set up a business to sell their services with the slogan that they can treat corns very effectively and without causing pollution. If other people with superpowers knew that Ji was using his abilities this way, they would be furious. At that moment, Ji's subordinate suddenly discovered a red pimple on Ji's forehead. It seemed to have gotten much bigger, but Ji still didn't pay attention to it. Just then, an acquaintance from school, Sachiko, whom they had met several times in Murukawa Town, brought a letter written by Professor Masami himself. The general content of the letter was to apologize to everyone for not being able to meet them face to face. Emi was extremely disappointed that the professor never mentioned his real purpose. She remembered the previous call and asked Sachiko, "What does opening the window mean?" Sachiko was silent for a long time before saying it was an extremely scary dream and nightmare that many people in the town had encountered. Right at this moment, she ran to Sachiko and he received the news. Seeing the red pimple on his forehead, her eyes clearly showed concern. After a bit of avoidance, she changed the subject and said her purpose for coming here. She and the town chief wanted to find Takashi. Meanwhile, the host and Takashi's accomplices had just entered the parking lot and were immediately confronted by two policemen. They had investigated the host's involvement in the destruction of public property. While the two sides were close to each other, the host only heard an explosion. Suddenly, two policemen disappeared. Then the host widened his eyes in surprise as a large black ball came from the front. On the other side, Takashi still did not know the trouble that was about to come. At this time, he was immersed in the admiration of the audience members because Takashi promised as long as they paid the full fee to join the association, he would personally teach them the hole-punching superpower. Suddenly, the town chief appeared with a few people to warn him not to use superpowers outside the town. Takashi couldn't obediently listen to him and incited the high-ranking members to stand up together against the old-fashioned men in the town. His sister Sachiko couldn't accept it anymore and immediately exposed Takashi's lie. The superpower of punching holes can't be learned. Only people with a certain bloodline can do it. Takashi calmly mocked Sachiko's baseless nonsense. Sachiko could only use a fatal move to criticize her brother. Would kill people. These words immediately made Takashi remember an unknown memory. Takashi's face immediately twisted and distorted as he prepared his superpower. Suddenly, there was an explosion outside the window. A super big round hole appeared and a giant with superpowers, Zuki, had appeared. Takashi saw Zuki like seeing a ghost, but Takashi's members still didn't know how serious the situation was until another big hole appeared on the roof. At this time, no one there dared to boast anymore. Zuki said his purpose for coming was that the host had violated the big taboo of Marukawa Town, so Zuki made him evaporate from the world. Then Zuki was about to take Takashi when he looked at G standing nearby, and suddenly, for some reason, he was about to kill him. But Sachiko just in time blocked G's face, erasing Zuki's murderous intention. As Zuki left, G was extremely confused and asked the town chief why Zuki wanted him to disappear when they first met. The chief didn't understand anything and kept shaking his head. Only Sachiko could guess to some extent that Zuki was originally someone who had hopes of becoming a priest. Over the years, he has always managed people with superpowers, and unstable people like him thought it best for G to disappear so that he could take care of things. In front of Zuki, Takashi was obedient like a child. The chief mentioned the rules in the village and told G not to arbitrarily use superpowers around. Besides being a dangerous weapon that can turn the whole world upside down, G disagreed with this statement. He believed that superpowers could also be used to help people. Sachiko's thoughts were even more negative. She thought that this kind of ability should not exist in the world. The three factions argued until their faces were red. Takashi finally left in anger. Then Sachiko went alone to see G. She apologized for her extreme words. She felt like she was afraid of something. Sachiko nodded and said she was the one who had opened the window. She had long witnessed the scary scene of the outside world on the other side of the window. Having finished speaking, she slowly took off her jacket to reveal a back full of scars. This is the content of the first 5 episodes of the movie Tanabata Land. The movie is still being updated. Remember to subscribe to the channel and press the notification bell button to not miss the latest episodes. Thank you for your attention. Goodbye and see you again.